Welcome to the complete guide to finding and identifying owls. In this video, we're going to go through 9 easy tips that will guarantee you more owl sightings, and then towards the end of the video, we're going to go step by step through all 19 owls found in the US and Canada. This video was designed with the beginner in mind, so you do not have to know a lot about birding or owls to be able to follow along with what I'm going to be sharing in here. If you love owls, then I made this video just for you, so let's get started. The first tip is to learn when owls are most active. Most people think of owls as nocturnal birds that you only see and hear at night. And while that is mostly true for a lot of species, owls can still be active during the day, especially species like the burrowing owl. Tip 2 is to listen for calls. Owls will often call at night and even sometimes during the day with a mix of territorial hoots. Some owls have screeches, others have whinnies. But getting familiar with key species vocalizations means you might be able to know what you're hearing before you are even able to see it, and sometimes you're not even able to see it because maybe it's too far away or it's in really dense woods, and so knowing owls' vocalizations will be very helpful. Tip number 3 is to know the habitat, because different species prefer different habitats. For example, the burrowing owl is always going to be found out in open prairie where it's able to use prairie dog burrows as a house, and then owls like the barred owl are always going to be found in forests. The next tip is to use local reports and tools. You can use eBird, which is my favorite, or local bird forums to see where owls are being seen around you. eBird does restrict the visibility of certain species like the northern hawk owl, the great gray owl, just because these are sensitive species that we don't want to be disturbed by a bunch of birders going to find them. But for more common species like the great horned owl or the barred owl, eBird is a great way to see where these birds are often seen. Field guides can also be a great way to look at range maps and see how many owls are in your area. The next tip is to go when visibility is good. If you're trying to hear owls, you do not want it to be windy because that is going to make it pretty nearly impossible to hear owls depending on how windy it is. If you're trying to get pictures or see an owl, you definitely don't want to go in the middle of the night. That's going to make it a lot tougher. So dawn or dusk is usually the best time if you want to see an owl, and that's also when owls are usually most active. And also you want to be quiet and use good stealth because owls have very good hearing, and so they're probably going to be able to hear you before you can even see them, so you want to make sure you're not being too loud or causing that much of a disturbance. And then if you're going out at night and you see an owl, do not shine your flashlight on it. It would be better for the owl if you shine it at a nearby tree trunk and then use the light reflecting off that to be able to view the owl, but you definitely don't want to just shine a direct light right in an owl's face. Also, another tip would be to watch likely perches. Great horned owls often like to perch high up where they can get a good view of the whole area, so I've seen a great gray owl perch on telephone poles before. That can be a great place to look for them. I've seen a barn owl perch on a fence before looking for rodents, and so scanning these likely areas is going to give you a much better chance at finding owls. Also, during the daytime, owls do roost, so you can search different trees and look for owls. Barred owls are typically seen in trees. Long-eared owls can be found in trees. Really, most of the owls that you're going to be looking for are found in trees during the day. And speaking of that, during the day, songbirds will often mob an owl. And so that brings us to our next tip, and is to pay attention to songbirds mobbing. I once found a great horned owl at the very top of a tree because all the birds around it, like the blue jays, the European starlings, the grackles, they were all going crazy. And so I decided to investigate and give it a little bit more look, and decided to look at this one tree where everything seemed to be concentrated, and sure enough, at the very top there was this big great horned owl that was just kind of hanging out, and then eventually decided to fly away because the birds were just going crazy around him. And so anytime you hear a bunch of birds mobbing a particular tree, whether that be blue jays, crows, a lot of birds do it, chickadees too, pay attention because there could be something cool like an owl, a hawk, or even a snake. And then my last tip is to go owling in the winter. This is when owls are most active because it is their breeding season, and there's also not a lot of leaves on the trees. The only trees that have any kind of cover are evergreens, and so it's going to make it a lot easier to see owls, and owls are going to be calling a lot more often than in the spring, summer, and fall because it is the breeding season. So now let's go over some owl field marks and terminology that you probably want to know before we get on to the next section, which is a complete guide through all of the owls found in North America. And so to identify an owl well, you want to know your basic anatomy and field marks, so that way when you see an owl, you know what to look for. So to explain some of this, let's take a look at this great horned owl here. So one of the most prominent owl field marks is these ear tufts, and they're not actually ears. The ears are on the side of its head over here. They can help with camouflage and stuff, but a lot of owls can be identified by their ear tufts. So in the great horned owl, it's got these big namesake ear tufts or horns. They're not actually horns, they're just feathers. And then also owls have facial discs. So one of the most prominent facial disc owls is the barn owl. It's got these two facial discs that kind of form like a heart shape, very distinctive. And then the great horned owl here does have that too. And so looking at the size of the facial discs, the shape, and even the color can help us identify owls. Next is eye color. There's a lot of variation in eye color between owl species. The great horned owl has yellow eyes, well, then a bird like the barn owl is going to have black or sometimes even reddish eyes. The barred owl has all black eyes, and so that can be a great way to identify owls as well. Another great thing to look at is bill color. So on the great horned owl, we have a black bill. On the barred owl, we have more of this pale bill. And so bill color is also something that you're going to want to look for. And then another really great thing to look for is plumage. So that's one of the most obvious field marks that we want to look for. So on the great horned owl here, how we would describe this plumage is we've got like brown and black and white barring on the belly, pretty dark wings, and then it does have some white up in the chin area. One of the most distinctively plumaged owls is the snowy owl. It is all white. There is no other owl in North America that is all white like this, and so that is a great way to separate it from other species. Also, we're going to want to pay attention to owl size, and this can be kind of hard to judge because say the owl's like 100 feet in front of you, you don't really have a whole lot to compare it to. You know, you can compare it to the size of the tree, but you don't know how tall the tree is, and so it can get kind of complicated. So you just want to use your best judgment. But like overall, the great horned owl is going to be significantly larger than the barred owl, and the eastern screech owl is going to be a lot smaller than a barred owl. So you do want to get just an idea on what size of an owl you're looking at, and generally it's pretty noticeable. So now let's go step by step through all 19 species of owls found in the United States. You definitely don't want to skip this section because I think it will be very helpful for you to see all of the owls in North America and also know exactly how to identify them. I'll put chapters on every single species, so that way if you're in, an area that you don't have the Boreal Owl, you can just skip that and move on to the next one. And so with that said, let's get into it. So the first one and the most common owl across all of North America is the great horned owl. It is the heaviest owl in North America, not quite the tallest. The great gray owl is a little bit taller than it, but overall we've got a pretty distinctive bird with these two big ear tufts, bright yellow eyes, super big bird, and then just a lot of brown, black, and white barring on it. Makes for very good camouflage. This owl's voice is more of like the traditional deep hoots. A very common owl, and when most people think of owls, this is usually the bird that they're thinking of. Next one is another very common owl, and that is the barred owl. So if we look at the back of the barred owl, we've got this black and white barring on its wings, which is where it gets its name. We've got heart-shaped facial disc, black eyes, and then this olive bill. We kind of already talked about that earlier, but overall a pretty common owl. Has a lot of white on its belly and not a whole lot of confusion species in its range. There are 2 potential confusion species and there's not a lot of overlap, thankfully. So this is a spotted owl. It can be confused for the barred owl fairly easily, but one big thing that you'll notice is the barring on its belly. These stripes go sideways, while on the barred owl they go up and down, and so that's a great way to separate them. And also the spotted owl is going to be a little bit smaller, still has that olive colored bill, and then it has more spots on its back. And the spotted owl is a western bird found in like the Pacific Northwest. There is a Mexican subspecies found in Mexico and southern Arizona. They are not very common. Barred owls are a lot more common, so make sure you're paying attention and separating them if you overlap with their range. The next one is the eastern screech owl, and so this is a bit of an interesting owl because it has 2 different color morphs. So we have the red color morph here and then the gray color morph over here. They're both the exact same species, but they can look pretty different. Overall, structurally, they look pretty much the same. Their color is the only thing that's a little bit different, but we've got these 2 big ear tufts, and again, this is a very small owl, so while it does have these ear tufts just like the great horned owl, they are much smaller. It is very noticeable. Eastern screech owl is going to be less than a foot tall. It's got black eyes with a little bit of yellow around them, and then just pretty good camouflage. Again, not a lot of overlap with any confusion species. The western screech owl could be confused for them, but the western screech owl only has 1 color morph. So unlike the eastern screech owl, there is none of this red color morph. It is just gray, and they look nearly identical. Really isn't a good way to separate them except by range. In the western United States and Canada, it's going to be western screech owl, and in the eastern United States and Canada, it's going to be the eastern screech owl. So the next one is the barn owl. Pretty distinctive owl, not super common, but they have a very large range. So while their range is very large and covers most of the United States and Canada, I'm not exactly sure how far south or north it goes. But it's a very large range, and they're not very common within that range, so their density isn't very big. But we've got a pretty distinctive owl. They're all white, and then we've got brown on their back. Again, these famous heart-shaped discs, and then their reddish-black eyes separate them from pretty much all other species. The only other owl with this much white on its body is the snowy owl, and their range really doesn't overlap really at all with the snowy owl. Next one is the northern Saw-Whet Owl, a very small and cute owl. We've got black and yellow eyes, and then some brown and white all over its belly. Pretty small owl as well, one of the smallest I believe. More of a northern species, prefers to hang out in pine trees. And then something that you'll notice is it is screech owl size, but it doesn't have any ear tufts. It's got a very big round head. Next one is the short-eared owl, and it technically does have some ear tufts. They're not always visible, and they are very short, so that's why it's called the short-eared owl. We've got facial disc, do form a little bit of a heart shape, pretty dark owl, and then these yellow and black eyes. These birds do not like to be in forests. They are typically found hunting around prairies and wetlands, so not an owl that you're going to find in the forest, and that should separate it from most species right there. If you're looking to find these guys, they do like to come out around dusk, so evening is going to be the best time to find them, and they'll come out a little bit earlier than most owls would be expected to be flying around. Next one is the burrowing owl. One of the most distinctive owls just because of habitat. It is found in open prairies. They like to nest in prairie dog houses, and then in Florida they take over unused tortoise burrows and they nest in there because they cannot actually dig their own burrows. But a pretty distinctive bird. They like to have this upright posture, brown and white barring on the belly, and then these bright yellow eyes. Again, there really isn't any confusion species in their range just because of their unique habitat. So this one is a long-eared owl, and as its name suggests, it has these long ear tufts. Long-eared owl is going to be a lot rarer than the great horned owl. Still has a large range, but their density within that range is not very high. And so the long-eared owl does look very similar to the great horned owl. The best way to separate it is it has larger facial discs that go farther up the head and then farther down the head compared to the great horned owl. Next one is the northern pygmy owl. As its name would suggest, it is a very small owl. Pretty distinctive in just its size and then overall coloring and pattern. Yellow eyes, olive colored bill. The next one is the Flammulated Owl, one of the most migratory owls out there. More of a western species, very small, can be confused with the northern pygmy owl, but the northern pygmy owl has a lot more white on its belly compared to the Flammulated Owl. Next one is a very distinctive owl, the snowy owl. We've got bright yellow eyes and then a bright white body. A very northern bird. It doesn't overlap with much owl species. In the winter it will occasionally come farther south. Really just depends on rodent populations up north. Next one is the spotted owl. We kind of already covered it, how to separate it from the barred owl. Again, not a super common bird. The barred owl is more common within most of its range. Next one is the Boreal Owl. It can look kind of similar to the northern Saw-Whet Owl. Northern Saw-Whet Owl is going to be smaller than the Boreal Owl. And the Boreal Owl is also more of a darker brown color and has these white spots on its back. Next one is the northern hawk owl. It does kind of look surprisingly like a hawk. Fine gray barring on its belly, and then just overall kind of with these black stripes on its face, gives it a very distinctive look. Next one is the Whiskered Screech Owl. Now for most of the country you're not going to have any trouble with these guys because they are only found in southeastern Arizona, and so you're not going to run into these guys very much. Their range does overlap a little bit with the western screech owl, but the Whiskered Screech Owl is going to be found at higher elevations than the western screech owl is. Next one is the elf owl. Another pretty rare owl, only found in southern Arizona and in southern Texas. It's the smallest owl found in North America, pretty brown colored, and then again size will separate it from pretty much any other owl species in its range. This next one is the Ferruginous Pygmy Owl, only found in South Texas, and a few of them have been found in southern Arizona. It looks a lot like the northern pygmy owl. Range is the best way to separate them. And then this next one is the great gray owl, the tallest owl in North America. It's not quite the heaviest because the great horned owl is a little bit heavier, and it can be confused for the barred owl just because it looks kind of similar, but the great gray owl has this white bow tie, if you will, and then these bright yellow eyes, and then it is significantly larger than the barred owl. If you really like this complete guide to bird series, go ahead and check out this playlist right here for all of the other videos like this that I've made.